Welcome to chapter 14, which is the first chapter in our fourth module. And in this chapter, we are carrying on with the management process. If you recall, we have done already planning. And in module 3, we look at organization. In this fourth module, our concern will be with leadership, leading and leadership. In chapter 14, we will look specifically at what leadership is, what leading is, the different types of leadership, and the contemporary issues related to leadership, or the contemporary types of leadership that have become prominent in business society. And in chapter 17, we're going to look at team and team development because, of course, that is intrinsically tied with leadership, especially in present-day business organizations. So let's begin with chapter 14, and let's first look at or define leadership and then see its role in the management process. So the definition here of leadership, and I like this definition a lot, is that it's the process of inspiring others to work hard to accomplish important tasks. And this here begins or identifies the difference between leadership and the traditional approach to management. It's because of this word right here, inspiring others to work hard. Leadership means that I want to motivate my workforce to do something that I would require them to do. I want to motivate them. I want to lead them. I want to have them to embrace a concept, a notion, an ideal, to work hard and therefore accomplish the objective that we would have set forth in the planning phase. Okay? Some of the contemporary challenges, some of the things that leaders face in today's business environment are things like shorter time frame for accomplishing things. If you recall, when we talked about strategic planning, I said 20 years was kind of the norm maybe 30 years ago. Now leaders have to consider very short time frames. You're looking at 3 to 5 years sometimes for strategy, sometimes even shorter than that. High performance expectations. We want our businesses to do great things. We want them to continually do great things, and those performance expectations place a lot of a demand on leaders to basically get the organization to a place where it can continue to succeed. Complex, ambiguous, and multi-dimensional problems. A lot of the world right now, a lot of business environments are highly complex. There are many things that are related to each other, and we also talked about the high level of uncertainty in many environments. Leaders have to deal with those types of uncertainty and instability on a daily basis. And then scarce resources. Of course, the competition for resources has become great, and leaders have to find ways to gain or access those resources for their organization in order to be successful. So always remember, leadership is about inspiration. It is about getting people to be committed to an ideal, getting people to identify with the organization, with the actions that you are describing or that you are requiring them to do, and having them then be motivated to put effort, to persevere, to want to achieve this, and in that way leading to organizational success. So then how does leading fit into the entire management process? So if you recall, planning is all about setting the direction, determining at this point what I want to achieve and how I will achieve it. Organization that we looked at previously, that creates the structure, it fuses the cultural blood, if you will, that then is the vehicle to get us to the point that we want to be at. That is the vehicle. What does leading do? Well, it instigates or catalyzes or motivates that vehicle. It's the driving force, okay? And then a leader inspires effort. They communicate vision, they build enthusiasm, they activate a commitment or hard work. If you remember that action orientation that we spoke about in terms of setting goals, right? Action orientation, getting people driven and motivated. That's what leaders do. There is that structure, but if the structure is not motivated, it will lay dormant. And so the leadership charges the structure up, and then the structure begins to move. Then the organization begins to move, and then the implementation gains momentum. In order for a leader to inspire or to influence, they have to have power. They have to have power. Now, we use that term a lot, but sometimes we don't really know or understand clearly what power is. What power is the ability to get someone else to do something you want done or make things happen the way you want them to happen. That is power. Essentially, is the ability to influence someone to do something or to do it in a manner that you prescribe. Okay? Now, many times when we think about power, we think of it in terms of a bad connotation. Somebody's forcing somebody else, to do something against their will. That's not real social or real leadership power. That is an abuse of power, as we'll see. It is a type of power, it's an approach to power, but it is not a very effective approach to power. Power, as it said here, should be used to influence and control others for the common good, meaning for the benefit of the organization and of society, not for the benefit of personal satisfaction. So when we think about power, many times we think about the latter, when someone is exercising control for some kind of personal gain or personal satisfaction. I want you to do this because this makes me look good, or because I can make you do this. That is not real or effective power. That is not effective power at all. That is personal abuse of power. Well, what are the types of power? Two sources really of managerial power. There is positional power, okay, and that is a power because of what you are or where you are in the organization. And then there is personal power, which is power that emanates because of who you are. So positional power, what you are, your title, or where you are in the organization. Personal power has to do more so with who you are, your personal, your personality. Position power, well, it's based, as I said, on a manager's official status in the organization's hierarchy. So you're the CEO, you have power. You're the head of a division, you have power, okay? Because of where you are located and what title you hold. What are some of the sources of that? Well, of course, your ability to influence based on your position is largely part or related to your reward power. That is your capability to offer something of value to an individual. So you might want to listen to your boss and follow his or her instructions because they have the ability to get you promoted or to increase your salary. That's reward power, okay? My son listens to me because he recognizes that if he does, he can get rewarded. He can get chocolates or toys. Reward power because of my position. Coercive power, again, is what we normally think of, or perhaps conventionally think of when we think about power, and that's the capability to punish or withhold positive outcomes from someone. So you might again listen to your boss because not because you think that she will reward you, but you are fearful of being punished. If you don't do this, you might get fired, you might get reprimanded. That's coercive power, where I'm using punishment as an area or as a means towards influencing someone. And then the third area, the third source of positional power is legitimate power. And that's position or status. The organizational position or status confers the right to control those in subordinate positions. It always intrigues me when I'm looking at television or I see something live where there is this very large man, and he's a big guy, and he's in a prison jumpsuit, and he's being held, right? He's in handcuffs, agreed, but he's being held by this little police officer, and sometimes it's a female police officer, and I'm sure well trained in self-defense. But when you look at the size difference, you think, my God, how are they able to do that? Well, she's not necessarily doing that through her strength. She's really doing that because of her legitimate power. He recognizes that she has a right to hold him prisoner. He may not like it, but we recognize that. That's why no matter the size of the police officer that stops you, if they have a badge, you listen to them. That's why when you come to class, you sit down, and if the professor says, be quiet, you are quiet. Why? Because you recognize that they have a legitimate power, they have a legitimate right to say that because of their position. Okay, so those are the three sources of positional power. Again, what you are in your organization or where you stand in your organizational hierarchy. The other type of power we looked at was personal power. And that's, again, based on your unique personal qualities, your personality, your personal attributes, whatever personal attributes you bring to the leadership situation. So what are some of the sources of that power? Well, you have one, expert power. And that's the capacity to influence others because of one's knowledge and skills. I think of the basketball players. We have some basketball players in our class. And gentlemen, I'm sure you listen to your coach not necessarily or just because he is your coach, because of that legitimate power, or because he can reward you. Yes, he can, or he can even punish you. But many times you listen to your coach because you think he's intelligent. Think about your professors as well. Okay, yeah, well, I have to listen to them because they're, well, yes, you do, but you don't necessarily, especially in a class like that. You could turn my lectures off. But if you feel that I have some kind of expert knowledge, I have some kind of skill that can help you in terms of your ability to do the job, your ability to do well in this class, then you are likely to listen and be influenced by what I say. You believe in me and my knowledge. Okay, that's expert power. So you believe in my capabilities, or you believe in the leader's capabilities and knowledge. Referent power is the capacity to influence others because they admire you and want to identify positively with you. So sometimes you have a leader where it's not necessarily just about their skill or their knowledge or just about their position. It's about their influence and how much you relate to them, how much you admire or like them. Many people follow Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. not because they had to. He wasn't their boss. He wasn't, in any position to reward them or anything like that. They just simply admired who he was and what he stood for. They liked him. Many people follow President Obama because he has referent power. They like him, they admire him, and he influences. He has the ability then to influence. Personal power, just like positional power, and sometimes even more so than positional power, can allow a leader to influence. Because think about this. You might lose your ability to reward or to punish, or you might even lose your legitimacy, but your personal attributes stay with you. And if so people are following you because of who you are, then they're more likely to follow you even during troublesome times when you can't reward or you can't punish or you don't even have that legitimacy. We often talk today as well when we mention leadership about visions. We said leaders often have to have vision, and this concept of visionary leadership, therefore, is very, very relevant to topics on leadership in today's society. What is a vision? We've kind of seen that before. It's a future that one hopes to create or achieve in order to improve upon the present state. It's where I want to be, what I aspire to. What does visionary leadership do? What does it do? I'm sorry. It brings to the situation a clear and compelling sense of the future, as well as understanding of the actions needed to get there successfully. Now that's really important, this definition, because you must be careful to not confuse visionary leadership with dreaming leadership. Dreamers are good. They give us an idea, they give us an ideal, they give us this hope for a better future, but often dreamers to ignore the fact that there must be some tangible steps that must be undertaken to realize that dream. So visionary leadership is not just giving someone a sense of hope or identifying a future state that is better than the former state, but it is also about understanding the actions, identifying and demonstrating to others the actions that are going to be necessary to get to that future state. That is why Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. again represents an effective example of visionary leadership, He did not just provide people with this future, this ideal, this dream, but he also identified the steps that were going to be necessary to get to that dream. What did we have to do? What will this take in terms of our resources, our time, even our lives? He identified clearly the vision, but also the path towards that vision. There's also a recent concept that we begun to discuss in leadership, and that's servant leadership. And what servant leadership is about commitment to others. Again, we used to think of the leader as being at the very top and then being able to influence all the others below. Follow me. Well, servant leadership kind of turns it on its head a little bit, where the leader is about how can my activity, how can what I do here best help the people that are following me. So when I make decisions, it's not just because of what I want to see achieved, even if I think what I want to see achieved is best for the organization, but it is also, and I take into consideration, what is best for my employees, for my subordinates. So I essentially am putting my life, figuratively sometimes, on the line to ensure that my followers are best helped. So you look at being other-centered rather than being self-centered. You don't look at power as some zero-sum quantity. So you're willing to delegate. You're willing to have others follow, the people that are following you, participate in leadership, and you try to empower your leaders. Okay. I've often heard quotes from people that I've seen as powerful and influential leaders, and they say to me that their job, their role is to make themselves as redundant as possible. And what they mean by that is that they want to start the process. They want to get the process going, but they want to train and they want to empower their followers such that they will no longer be necessary or required in future years, meaning that the followers will be able to lead themselves because they were well taught by the leadership. So leaders aren't there to try to protect their fiefdom. They're really there to try to help those that are following them to be better, to be more effective, and to essentially take up that mantle of leadership in future years. And so obviously related to the servant leadership is the idea and the concept of empowerment, the process through which managers enable and help others to gain power and achieve influence. You want to make sure that your employees, while you're leading them, feel empowered, right? You want to give them the information, because information leads to power. When you have access to knowledge and information, it gives you the ability to think logically and think effectively about things. Responsibility. I want to be able to give you or to challenge you with certain tasks. If you don't get the chance to do something, how are you going to be able to actually do it? Authority. You need the authority. You need the legitimacy that authority gives you to be able to make decisions. And trust. I have to trust you. I have to, once I put that into your hands or I ask you to do something, I have to believe that you are able and that you are willing to do this successfully. That's empowerment. Empowerment is not simply giving somebody a task and then looking over their shoulder or believing, that they're going to fail or giving them no resources to do that task. Empowerment is about believing in the individual, right? Giving them the challenge, legitimizing their position, meaning that I will support your decision and you have the authority to make that, and providing them with the resources like information to be successful at it. So empowerment is not simply delegation. It is about infusing leadership and leadership ability into your followers. What we're going to turn to next, now that we have looked at leadership, defined leadership, and talked about some of the contemporary traits or perspectives on leadership, we're going to focus now on some leadership research. And what researchers have been doing for many years is attempting to figure out what makes the best leader. And the initial approaches to leadership research was to try to identify some specific traits or specific attributes or even specific behaviors that all leaders initially should have. And so you see after some research that academics have come up with a group of traits that leaders potentially should all have or should all demonstrate. So we talk about things like honesty and integrity, drive, self-confidence, creativity, cognitive ability, business knowledge, motivation, and flexibility. The most successful leaders, especially in today's business environment, demonstrate some or all of these attributes to varying degrees, but these are some of the things that make leaders successful or help leaders to be successful. You'll notice on this list there's nothing about height, there's nothing about gender, there's nothing about ethnicity, there's nothing about the things or the way that you speak necessarily, your accent. None of those things seem to be that important when it comes to leaders, but these things tend to be important. Now, I will give you a qualifier, and as you will see as we go along in this chapter, we will adopt more of a contingency approach. And if you remember, you recall what contingency has to do with, it basically means it depends. So it does not necessarily mean that all leaders should embody all of these traits to the same degree or the same level in all situations. But what this suggests that leaders across many contexts, across many cultures, tend to demonstrate some or all of these traits in some degree. So this is some level of a commonality here. It does not mean that all leaders need to be flexible, or all leaders in every culture needs to be flexible, but that is a trait that seems to be common. I hope you understand that. So initially we were looking more for what types of traits, what type of characteristics that all leaders should embody, and that's kind of what we came up with. And then we focused our attention more so away from traits to, but then how should leaders behave? How should leaders behave? So leadership behavior theories, they focus on how leaders behave when working with followers, okay? So what is the best type of behavior or activity? What is the best type of leadership style? And style is simply a recurring patterns of behavior, okay? How should I act continuously? And that's what research started to focus on, this leadership behavior. How should leaders act towards their followers in order to provide the best benefit for the leader, for the follower, and for obviously the organization? And this behavior research came up with two important dimensions of any leadership behavior. They said that leaders must be concerned for the task to be accomplished. So there must be some concern for the actual action, right? Whatever role or whatever behavior you are demanding of the follower. And then there's also the concern for the follower, concern for the people doing the work. So leaders must concern themselves about the work that is actually being done by the follower, and leaders should also concern themselves about the people that are doing the work. Now, just from those two dimensions, you can think back of some of your leaders, some of your managers, some of the people maybe in your team leaders, and you can see that in some respect, people vary based upon these two dimensions. You can think about maybe there is a manager where they would just work. Something was happening in your family. You probably had someone that died, or someone was sick, and you mentioned them, and they're like, oh, okay, that's yeah, but did you get the report done? That is a leader that is more concerned with the work than the person. Now, you may think about managers where they were so overly concerned about the person, they necessarily didn't concern themselves too much about the work. So they spend more time socializing, right? They spend more interacting, finding out how your family was, how things were going. And that was great to some respect, but they never seemed to get anything done. And so when there were times for reports or deadlines, the organization or department never met it because the leader wasn't that concerned about the task. So you talk about, that was a nice guy, he was a nice manager, a nice person, but I don't know if they were that effective, or this person was just hard. I mean, they were all about work. We got stuff done, but nobody liked her, or nobody liked him. That's what we talk about. So two dimensions: the concern for the task, and then the concern for the people doing the work. So this leadership grid kind of tries to combine both elements, concern for task and concern for the individual, on this 2x2 matrix, and you see these 5 different approaches, or 5 different leadership styles, if you will. You got the impoverished leader, where they're basically not good at anything. They don't care about people, and they don't care about the task at hand. So they're basically very ineffective in terms of leadership. They don't care. They're impoverished. You have the country club manager, which is kind of like the person I spoke about earlier, where they're really concerned about people. They're all about, socialization, finding out how you are, trying to be your buddy, trying to be your friend. But the concern for production, the concern for actual task, getting work accomplished, is very low. Okay, doesn't necessarily work very well. Excuse me. Then you have the authority obedience manager. This is what we kind of call the autocratic leader. And they focus on efficiency of task and operation. Did you get this done? I need you to have this report. We need to have this finished. I'm looking at your work. I'm checking your reports. Those are the ones that are most concerned about production, about task operations. And very, very little concern is being placed on people. Those are your autocratic leaders. You have your laissez-faire leader, where it doesn't care about anything. Your human relations leader, love your people, don't care too much about the work. Authority obedience, the autocratic leader, it's all work. I don't really care too much about the people. And then you have the democratic leader, where they're trying to focus on building participation and support for a shared purpose here. So what they are is that they are high on concern for people, but they're also concerned and there's a high level of concern, I should say, about the operation. So hey, we're friends, we work together, we want to get this accomplished. I want to see you do well as an individual. I want to see you do well in your personal and your professional life. But we're doing this in terms of getting the job done. We want to see ourselves being performance-oriented and leading towards success. And that's a democratic leader. The middle of the road manager tries to kind of balance work output and morale. They try to kind of live in between, and not necessarily always effective doing this kind of balanced approach. You might argue, the argument was that a democratic leadership style was always the best. It was always the best because, again, it was the best of both worlds. High concern for people and high concern for production. Now that sounds relatively or intuitively correct, right? That democratic leadership is always the best approach to leadership. Well, yes, intuitively it sounds good, but if you really think about it, that is not necessarily true. Think about a situation where there is a high level or an urgent sense of a threat. Okay, I remember 9/11, and 9/11 happened in New York. The mayor of that time was Rudy Giuliani, and Rudy Giuliani was not a very popular mayor before 9/11, as I recall. And the reason why Rudy Giuliani was not a very popular mayor was because he practiced more so than other mayors, this autocratic leadership style. He was very, very big on getting things done. He wasn't seen as a really personal, affable individual. Okay, he was all about the work. And then when 9/11 happened, Rudy Giuliani basically took the helm. Everybody was kind of lost in a daze. Rudy Giuliani came out and basically dictate to people what needed to be done. He was in control, and so that autocratic leadership style actually helped him to be successful in a time of high volatility and high uncertainty. You didn't necessarily want too much of a democratic leader at that time because there wasn't any time, there wasn't any ability to have participation, to get people to kind of come together and form this shared purpose. We didn't have that time. We needed somebody to basically tell us what we needed to do and tell us what to do now. And so that autocratic leadership style actually worked for Rudy Giuliani. Also, think about different cultures. There are different cultures in the world. Remember when we looked at chapter 5, we talked about the different cultures, and we looked at one characteristic, cultural characteristic in chapter 5. We looked at power distance. And power distance spoke about the acceptance of status difference or authority differences in society. And so, for example, in societies like China and in India, there are high power distances there where people basically look up to their leadership. They look up to their boss for direction, for guidance, for information. They're not willing culturally to accept certain delegative powers. They're not ready for that. They don't necessarily want that. They say, you as the manager, that's your job. Your job is to tell me what to do, and I then do it. I'm not ready for me to kind of tell myself what to do or to participate in this. And so culturally, I may not necessarily want a democratic leader. I might actually like an autocratic leader. Okay? Or I might like a country club type more country club style more. It depends. And I like that we are using that as we shift, because the dependency here is tied to this idea of a contingency model. So in brief lecture 2, we're going to look at a few contingency models that argue that leadership style and the effectiveness of leadership styles depends on the situation. What do we mean by the situation? The type of job, the type of work that's being employed, the structure, the environment of the work, the type of person, the type of follower that's involved here, okay, and the situation as a whole. So that is what we're talking about when we look at leadership style and contingency perspectives on leadership style. Leadership style depends on who you're leading, and also the tasks that are being required by those followers. So that's a brief lecture 2.